ordinance, and action to set a public hearing for the FY 2018 budget for Tuesday, August 8, 2017 at 6:30 p.m. Do we have any questions or amendments that we would like to make to the agenda?
Motion to
Well,
approve.
When can we talk about that budget?
We're going to discuss the budget, I
Right.
believe, after.
Okay. And tonight, that's tonight.
That is just, that right there
That's
is
just to
just
set
setting
the-
the hearing for it later in August.
Okay.
That's when we have to have it
Oh,
posted.
it's
Not
an,
approving anything.
Right.
and then, but we're, okay, I got it. And then we're gonna talk about the budget tonight?
After the regular meeting, correct? Like have a
Yes.
work session?
Right. That's what I was confused on. I didn't read it
Yep.
right there. So I guess I can ask this later, but, the meeting tonight, can we get it on is it over the broadcast? So it's not?
Can we not?
Do we not
can
want to do that,
Can we
or?
not broadcast it?
It's a work session.
It is a work session.
Right.
We can broadcast.
Yeah, legally, there's nothing holding us back, right?
No, there's nothing that prevents that.
I'm for put it on the air.
Okay.
There, just understand that there's going to be a relatively long break, close to 45-minute break between the end of our meeting that's going to be televised and when we come back, because we're going to go to 2 executive sessions tonight. And both of them one of them's a working executive session for the commission.
Okay.
And the other one's going to include Kindle. So just, as long as everyone's aware of that, it'll be
Okay.
non-televised.
And
for
I also want to make one other statement. If you set this precedence that we're going to televise work sessions, then from this point on, you better televise every single work session that you have from this date forward.
I'm okay with that.
I don't know why we would.
I'm just saying, if the precedence is set, then the precedence is set.
That doesn't mean that you have to do
That
it.
doesn't mean.
That mean that you have to do it, but you're setting a precedence.
Right. You're doing something.
So you're cherry picking what you're gonna put out there. That's what
Right.
I'm saying. Don't cherry pick, it's all or none.
I disagree with that respectively,
Well,
Chris, but I just think with everything that's going on with our budget, I think we ought to be some discussion about it.
I understand that. My caution is, though, is that you need to be either public or not public. You can't have it both ways. Is that if you're going to televise work sessions, you need to do them all. Just like a commission meeting. If you're gonna televise a commission meeting, you need to do them all. That's my statement, and you can disagree or agree, and I respect your disagreement. But the thing is, it's only fair that if you do one, you do them all.
Well, maybe it is. I'd have to think it and study that one. It's a new one for me on that one. Okay, so we'll move on.
I'll second the motion.
Did someone, okay.
Motion was made by Commissioner Williams and seconded by Mayor Bauer to approve the consent agenda as presented. Mayor Bauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Martin,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Castler,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor.
Aye.
Under public hearing, special presentation and proclamations, tonight we'll have a presentation of the fiscal year 16 audit by Jared Gilmore and Phillips. They will present the fiscal year 16 budget.
Good evening, my name's Phil Jarrett.
I'm sorry? Audit, sorry.
Okay.
I have a budget on my brain.
We've handed out the audit reports to you tonight, so I know you haven't had a chance to look through them, and you may have questions later, which we'd be glad to address any of those if management can't give you an answer. So I'll kind of take you through the audit, where you can find stuff, how it's put together, what to look for, and go from there. So our audit, page 1, 2, and 3 is our opinion on your December 31 year-end financial statements, 2016. It's on the regulatory basis of accounting, which is the way you keep your books and records. And by regulatory basis, the state of Kansas allows municipalities to waive out from under generally accepted accounting principles and report cash receipts of the funds. And then on the expenditure side, it includes payables at the end of the year, so it's more of an accrual basis on the expense side. So very conservative basis of accounting to get down to your fund balances, only recognizing cash that you actually receive, but recognizing all the outstanding obligations that are out there on the expense side. payables, for example, are paid in January of 17 for the month of December. So those are recognized in the year that they're incurred. Page 4 and 5 is a summary statement of receipts, expenditures, and unencumbered cash for all the various funds of the city. The first column is the beginning unencumbered cash, January 1st of 2016, then the 2016 receipts, expenditures, and the ending unencumbered cash balance. And by the unencumbered cash balance, we mean that had you paid all your bills on December 31st, this would have been how much cash was left in each one of the funds after those bills have been paid. We add back those bills, those payables in that second from the right-hand column to come back to what's actually in the bank accounts December 31, which is a higher number. And at the bottom of page 5, then we reconcile that to the bank accounts and show you where those funds are held. And those are the numbers that we've confirmed with the outside third parties to make sure that they do exist and the valuation is appropriate. I like to go down through this statement and look at balances to see if there's a trend of any decrease or increase and make sure it's explainable. As you go down through this particular statement, you look on line 4 under the capital equipment fund, it has a negative $123,992 in it. When we get back to the footnotes, I think we'll find that that fund's awaiting a reimbursement, which is legal. It's not a cash basis violation. So otherwise, you should see positive unencumbered cash balances all the way down through there. And again, I like to make sure, especially in the utility funds, that they're either holding their own or trending upwards or not, going downhill so fast that they're going to run out of cash without giving you some fair warning. So that's what I look for in that particular statement. That statement shows the users of your financial statements as to whether you complied with the Kansas cash basis laws by not encumbering more funds in a particular fund than what's available. Page number 6 is the beginning of the footnotes. Footnote number 1 is the largest footnote, talking about summary of significant accounting policies. A lot of this is boilerplate language, but for new commission members, it does show how your financial statements are, the policies followed in presenting these financial statements. So if a user is interested in comparing your municipality to another, and they can compare apples to apples and make an appropriate comparison. Bottom of page 8, I'll point out a few things. Bottom of page 8, talking about budgetary information, kind of gives you a bullet point list there of the budgetary calendar that you're following tonight and getting ready to adopt your budget. On page 9, if there were any amendments to the originally published budget, and there were, the first paragraph on the top of page 9, the last sentence, discloses the several different funds there where there were budget amendments prior to the end of December 31, 2016. So if you happen to go over the originally published budget, then you'd have to amend the fund, and that's the proper way to do that. Footnote number 2, stewardship, compliance, and accountability, compliance with Kansas statutes. I talked about statement number 1, showing you're in compliance with the cash basis laws. And there, if you look at the wording, it talks about, it looks like you were in excess of available monies in that capital equipment fund, but there is a statute out there that says you can end that with a negative unencumbered cash balance if you're waiting for a reimbursement, and that fund did meet that criteria, so there's no violation there. And then the next paragraph, the bottom of page 9 goes, I guess it ends there, it's just a short sentence. As shown in Schedule 1, which is a schedule we're going to see right after these footnotes, it's a budget and actual comparison. The city was in violation in one particular fund as the obligated expenditures in excess of the budget limits. It didn't get amended. Stephanie just told me there's 3 invoices that hit right December 31 for $511, and you're $509 over the budget. So, it's just one of those things that's really close on this internet utility fund. So once in a while you get caught up in that. It's, you'd rather it not happen, but if it does, it's not it's a statutory violation. You point it out, you just want to make sure it's not a habitual type of thing, and it's all, it's very explainable. Page 10, you do have revenue bonds out there. There's various covenants, particularly they want to make sure you have a bond and interest account such that the money's set aside where 30 days prior to the payment due date, the monies are there. A lot of them have replacement reserve accounts that are required to be held. This schedule on page 10 shows what the required amounts are in total of $4.6 million, and then we show what's actually in the funds set aside of $7.6 million. So you were well in compliance of any of the revenue bond ordinances. On page 11 there, right above footnote number 3, there's usually other compliance requirements in those revenue bond ordinances, and one in particular is that you set your rates such that your income minus your operating expenses, before any capital outlay, before any debt payments, you have to make sure those are set, and in your case, to where that equals 125% of, gets a profit, if you will, 125% of next year's principal and interest payments. So we've done the calculation there, and you were at 157%, so you did comply with all your revenue bond requirements. So that's important in selling future bonds particularly. Make sure you're always in compliance with those. Footnote number 3, talking about deposits and investments and where monies are held, et cetera. Down at the bottom of the page talks about kind of the statute and what the rules are for deposits and investments. Over on page 12, about in the middle of the paragraph there, we said as of December 31, the city's carrying amount of deposits was $28,915,000 some odd dollars, and show that that was covered with either FDIC insurance or pledged securities. So the gist of that footnote is that we always test to make sure that anytime during the year that your bank balances in excess of any FDIC coverage are covered by pledged securities from those financial institutions. So if that bank should fail, we want to make sure you have some of their securities such that you could sell at market value and restore the public's money back into your coffers. So we do that and look at it all year long. These are just the numbers as of December 31st. As far as showing compliance, but we just want to make sure you have a policy in place to monitor that, which you have had for a number of years, and we haven't had any issues with that for quite some time. Page 13, footnote number 4, is a schedule of the long-term debt of the city. Nice little schedule for budgeting purposes. It kind of shows the debt obligation down the left-hand side. GO bonds, those could either be paid with property taxes or paid with utility revenues, so that's designated there. Revenue bonds, which are almost always paid with utility revenues, and then revolving loans, which probably are paid by utility revenues also, depending on what the type of the loan is. But anyway, the right-hand side shows the activity for 2016, the beginning balance, the additions and the reductions of principal, and the end of the year balance, and then the interest paid for 2016. The next page, page 14, takes that same debt schedule and gives you a 5-year maturity of principal and interest there of the future obligations, which is nice for budgeting to make sure you get this embedded in your budget so you can make all your payments.
Please?
I am on page 14.
14, okay.
Mr. Chair, could I have you hold on just for a second?
Yeah.
Chris, can you adjust the sound? I'm being told that people can't hear. It sounds muffled and there's not good sound quality through the television.
Okay, I'll keep talking. Hopefully,
that's
if
fine.
I need to do something different, let me
No,
know.
thank you.
Page 14 and 15 actually is the debt schedule, shows you the next 5 years maturities of principal at the top, interest at the bottom, and then it's in 5-year increments thereafter. But I like this schedule for budgeting purposes to make sure all these debt schedules get embedded in your budget so we can make sure the payments are going to be paid with budgeted monies. Page 16, footnote number 5 on capital lease obligations. It's not a required footnote, but it gives a little bit more narrative about any capital leases that you have. Some of this narrative information is hard to get in a schedule like the footnote that we just went through, hard to get in a tabulation format there. So it's just a little bit more information as to what that capital lease obligation was for. Footnote number 6, it's required that you disclose any future operating leases that perhaps may bind future city commissions. Since you are in a calendar year, if there's any leases, operating leases signed out there, usually for a postage machine or maybe a copier, and in your case, you have obligations out there for $20,416 due in 2017. Sometimes we see those go on out for another 2 or 3 years. Footnote number 7, just a footnote on industrial revenue bonds, required disclosure. Obviously, the city is not obligated to pay on any of these IRBs, even though they may give an approval in the very beginning for those, but we do have to disclose how many are out there that are still outstanding. Footnote number 8, where you can call or write to get information on the Capers plan or the police and fire. This is just Capers here. At the bottom, or in the middle of page 17, we talk about the city's proportion of the Capers. Losing my place. Right above net pension liability heading. Just for your information, the contribution to the pension plan from the city for Capers was $526,177 last year, and for the Kansas Police and Fire retirement, it was $618,576. So that's the employer's obligation that was paid last year. Footnote number 9, talking about other compensated absences, usually vacation pay, sick leave. On the page 18, that continues on with that footnote, kind of gives the criteria for whether it's recorded or not. The city has an unfunded liability for vacation benefits as of December 31st of $825,245, and sick leave was $56,000, or I should say compensatory time, $56,588. So had you ceased business at that point in time, you might have owed those amounts to employees, but since you continue, they get paid when they take those benefits. Footnote number 10 on capital projects, just to keep this in mind as you do a large capital project that might go into different calendar years. In the beginning, you set up an authorized capital project amount, and then we monitor that each year and show it, like in this table, whether it's completed or not, and we show you the total expenses for that project to make sure you don't go over the original authorization. And if you ever do see that you're going to exceed that, then it needs to come back to the commission and have another reauthorization for a higher amount. So just to make sure, just a control there to make sure, 2 or 3 years later after a project starts, you don't go over what is originally approved for. Page 19, loans receivable. Since these aren't accrual basis statements on the income side, we don't have these receivables recognized anyway, but we'd like to disclose the economic development loans, the community development loan balances that are out there that are still being collected upon. And if there is any write-offs, we'd expect to see that in the commission minutes and see that you've tried to reach all the collectible efforts that you could. Footnote number 12, economic dependency. If there are any large vendors or users, we like to disclose that. You did collect 61.89% of your electric revenues from Coffeyville Resources nitrogen fertilizer plant. So obviously a big user of the system, and if that user went away, it's certainly going to have an effect on the city future operations. So users of the financial statements would want to watch that too. Risk management, a footnote on that, we have to disclose how you handle your exposure to risk. Most smaller entities do so by purchasing various insurance policies, which you do that, but you also have a health insurance fund and fund that with and also supplement it with a stopgap policy paying any aggregate claims over $50,000. So being a larger municipality, you're able to cover some of those other things and do a little bit more in the area of we're doing more than just purchasing insurance policies. And then the workman's comp, there is a system out there for the Kansas Eastern Region Insurance Trust that you go through to pool with other cities and municipalities to cover your workman's comp coverages. Commitments and contingencies on the bottom of page 19. Any future commitments or obligations. The city has entered into an agreement with the Grand River Dam Authority for the purchase of electrical services until 2042. And then there's always various lawsuits incurred through normal operations, and it's opinion of the city's management that the outcome of the litigation will not result in material loss to the city in excess of applicable insurance coverage. Page 20, footnote number 15, some people are interested in transfers between funds. We like to put this footnote in there so you don't have to go looking through all the funds. If this is something of interest to you, if you want to know how much general funds transfer into where, or utilities to general, or whatever, vice versa, it's all summarized right here so you can see the transfers that were made during 2016. Not a required footnote, but we like to put it in for disclosure purposes. And then lastly, footnote number 16 on subsequent events. If anything had transpired after December 31 up through the date of issuing these financial statements that we felt would have an effect on the financial condition of the city, we'd be required to report that, but we did not have anything that we felt needed to be reported. Supplemental information, the next page, page 21, is Schedule 1, an actual and budget schedule. It shows the second main thing we look for is make sure you're in compliance with the Kansas budget laws by not obligating any expenditures in excess of your originally published budget and/or amended budgets. And the very last one, we've already talked about, the internet utility went over its budget by 509.27, and that was due to 3 invoices that hit right there towards the last of 2016 that were unexpected. The rest of these financial statements, that I won't go through them individually or we'd be here quite some time, but these are the detail in each one of the funds. Many of the funds have budgets, but usually the fund, it'll show a prior year actual, which would be 2015's numbers, and then the actual will be 2016 compared to 16's budget, and show you whether it's over or under by a particular line item. I would remind you that you're not bound by budgets by line item. The only thing you're bound by Kansas statute is the total expenditures of a budgeted fund. So other than that, it's management purposes only by line item. And obviously you like to do that because you can help control how your spending goes as you meet during the year. So I'm not going to go through any of those. If there's any violations of cash or budget, I would have already talked about it. But it will tell you, if you want to look at a particular fund, what the results were in that particular fund. There are 40 of those schedules, and that goes back to page 65. Page 66 is an agency fund schedule. These are funds that really aren't the city's money, but you have the fiduciary responsibility. You have the money, and you take in money, disperse money like sales tax, fire insurance proceeds, drug forfeitures, and shows the ending cash balances. And of course, we like to make sure that those ending cash balances aren't negative. Otherwise, they would have used somebody else's money to have paid out of each one of those funds if that happened. Page 67 is a schedule of required bond information. Your bonds require these things about making sure you got insurance coverage, so highly summarized just to show the bond holders and bond counsel that you do have insurance in place on these major things that you may have some major indebtedness over. And it shows the number of users in the electric system for electric and water. I think one of those is probably electric, and one of those is, well, that's one's at the beginning of the year, one's at the end of the year. Electric and water users is total 6,280 to 6,219. Page 68 is a schedule of expenditures of federal awards. If you receive governmental monies, federal or state money, particularly federal money in this case, if you expend more than $750,000, you're subject to what's called a single audit, which is what we did. You have to pick those programs that are major programs, which basically exceed it's 250,000. There's some parameters in there. If you haven't had any findings in 3 years, we have to look at 25% of those expenditures. If you're not, then we have to look at half of them. So anyway, page 68 and 9 is a schedule of your grant awards. And then we have identified that we looked at the Community Development Block Grant, which was $743,000 of expenditures. That, out of a total of $869,000, is well over 50% of your federal expenditures, so that gave us the coverage that's required. And what we do then is there's compliance audit programs out there that we have to do detailed compliance testing on that particular grant or grants to make sure that you complied with the grant award itself. Our report on that is on page 70 through 73. 70 and 71 is our report on internal control and compliance over the city as a whole. Those are clean opinion. We did not find any material weaknesses or anything to be reported there. And then page 72 and 3 are over the compliance for each major award, that CDBG grant that we tested, making sure that there's anything there that needed to be reported or not. And there again, we were able to give you a clean opinion with no material weaknesses and no non-compliance with any of the grant awards. Page 74 is a summary basically of everything I went through. This single audit goes to the single audit clearinghouse, federal audit clearinghouse. They look at this page and kind of go down through there and say, okay, there's no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, no non-compliance, and look at it at that point, probably put it on the shelf. But if there were findings, we'd have to attach those findings, what caused them, what they were, management's response, but that did not occur. The last page, page 75, if there were findings, we have to follow up in the next year to see how they're alleviated, but you didn't have any last year either, so there's nothing to report. There's a letter in the front of the report dated July 10th, 2017. This is a letter of presentation. It's a required written communication between the auditor and those in charge of governance, which in this case, the full city commission. And some of it's boilerplate language, but on the first page there in the middle under qualitative aspects of accounting practices, particularly for new commissioners, we just want to let you know that there were no new accounting policies adopted and the application of existing policies was not changed during 2016. And we noted no transactions entered into by the city for which there's a lack of authoritative guidance or consensus. And all significant transactions have been recognized in the financial statement in the proper period. So proper cutoff of payables, for example. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit, nothing to report there. If we did have problems with irreconcilable records or evasive answers or anything that would have caused us grief or dismay or concern, we'd be required to report that to you in writing so you could do your fiduciary responsibilities in dealing with the situation and coming up with a solution. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements, which are adjusting entries, we've attached a list of those. There wasn't very many. We had a transferred employee benefits fund that had been recorded twice that we reversed out. I say we did it and you accepted it and it's been posted. And then we have found some additional payables for fuel and gas that we recorded and put that in expenses in 2016 rather than leaving it in 17. So those have been gone over with your staff and has already been posted to your records. They're embedded within this audit report. Disagreements with management on the top of the second page, nothing to report there. If we did have any disagreements it'd probably be over an accounting issue perhaps. If that did occur, we'd be required to report that in writing as well, and we did not have that. Management representations, at the end of any audit, any auditor would get a representation letter signed by probably the city manager, city clerk, people we deal with day in, day out when we're working on the field work. And it's a lot of bullet point things, things that we want disclosed. If there's something there that you see that you didn't make us aware of that's not in the financial statements but should be, we certainly want that pointed out to us so we can get those in there for you since we did help draft the financial statements. Just a reminder too that they're your financial statements, they're not ours. Technically in the unreal world in Kansas, but maybe in the real world on the East Coast, you would write the financial statements. We would come in and do an audit and put our opinion letter on it and say, yeah, your financial statements are correct or whatever our opinion would be. In Southeast Kansas, you have an audit report once a year, so we help draft the financial statements for all our municipalities, and you just have to disclose that and make sure that you take responsibility for it in reviewing the financial statements, which we've already done with management. But you as well need to look at them too and take responsibility for them. So we want the best financial statements going out there for the public so the users can all make a knowledgeable opinion if perhaps somebody wants to buy your bonds in the future or anything else. So management consultation.
Phil,
Yeah, go ahead.
While you're talking about how things are done here versus back east, is that because we don't have the resources?
That's one thing.
I don't talk about just our city, but rural America.
Typically, that's it, or the staff expertise. You probably have the staff expertise, and I don't know, Stephanie probably helped draft most of these statements, probably more so than most of our entities. Kansas, luckily, lets us waive out from under GAAP. If you had and there's in the footnotes, it talks about GAAP reporting versus the regulatory basis and all the differences. We don't have fixed assets, depreciation, accounts receivable, things like that in statements. If you had to get a GAAP statement, that thing could cost you probably $50,000 plus every year. And the thing about it that I always hate, but I always argue with, is they have all this stuff in the front of those audit reports that it's way over anybody's head because it's got all these accruals and estimates in it. And the last thing they reconcile back to is the budget and actual statements, which is your schedules back here. They always get back to those schedules. Kansas doesn't have any trouble selling bonds because we won't allow you to overextend an unencumbered cash balance in a fund. Now, if
You're talking about,
the state, yeah,
huh?
the state can't, by Kansas statute, you can't spend more than the cash balance in a particular fund. So Kansas has some pretty good laws to keep us, in back east, if I had a road or a bridge and I capitalized that on my financial statement, said it's worth $15 million, and somebody goes out and gives me a loan for $10 million, I poop it off on operating expenses. Well, you're not going to sell that thing for $15 million. It's worthless to anybody else. But that's the type of things you get in a GAAP statement, which I don't like. That's my personal opinion. But you get outside of Kansas, and they don't understand regulatory basis financial statements. And a lot of the people that buy your bonds, we have to explain to them what it is. And, it's very, very conservative accounting.
Okay. Okay, I've heard a little bit about GAAP, but very little, but thank you.
Okay? Last thing on that letter, management consultation with other independent accountants, that did not occur. If it did, probably indicates a disagreement with management that we'd be pointing out. But if it did, we just need to know that so we could give them any facts that we have so they could render a knowledgeable opinion on whatever that circumstance might be. But again, that did not occur. So I know I've hurriedly taken you through that, and I know you didn't have the report in front of you to look at it, maybe ask some questions that you might have later, but generally staff probably can answer your questions, but if there is anything we need to dig into, we'd be happy to help you out.
Any questions from the commission?
No,
It's a lot of information all at once, right?
These,
Good information, though.
the 2016 column in each one of these funds, then that back schedule, that 40 schedules back there, that ought to be the first column you're seeing in your budget that you're going to be looking at later tonight, because your budget starts out with what actually occurred in 16. That's what's in here. And then you're in the middle of 17, you're going to project the rest of this year and then project your budget for 18. So it all kind of ties together. So we like to try to get these out and make them
so
available.
what page
before
was that
budget.
on? I'm sure Stephanie can line us out on it.
Let's see, it starts on page 22. Those schedules that start on page 22, the 2016 column, that should be your first column that you see in your
Thank you.
budget document.
Thank you, Phil.
Yes, thank you for your time.
So you're traveling back to Wichita? Or-
Chanute, Kansas.
Chanute, you live in Chanute?
Kansas.
Listen, I robbed one of your copies, so check that out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
No
you,
other
Phil.
questions? So at this time, this isn't on the agenda, but last week, June 27th, we appointed Mr. Bo Rupert to the Montgomery County Juvenile Corrections Board. And due to some recent findings that are very concerning to me, along with some findings that have happened in the past, I can no longer support Mr. Rupert being on this commission. So at this time, I want to rescind my vote to have him on this board. Do I have a second?
Second.
So
I'll be more than happy to discuss this with any of the commissioners that have questions outside of this meeting tonight.
Since I wasn't here for that vote, can I second to rescind his vote? If I wasn't here? I would have voted no.
You're moving to reconsider.
you want to reconsider.
Reconsider.
Right,
Let's reconsider. I'll
reconsider
second
his
that.
vote. So I'll make a motion.
He can, because he wasn't. He can't
Right.
second.
Only a no vote cannot, correct? Second it,
Correct.
or make the motion.
I'll second.
Hang on, let me make a couple notes. here.
Sure.
Motion was made by Mayor Bauer and seconded by Commissioner Martin to reconsider the vote to appoint Bo Rupert to the Juvenile Community Corrections Board.
That is correct.
Mayor Bauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
I'm not reconsidering my vote. My vote was no. And do I have to vote on their reconsidering? Because I'm not reconsidering my vote. My vote was no, and it will remain no.
You're reconsidering the motion, and the motion did pass.
Okay, well, then I'll vote to reconsider the motion.
Commissioner Martin?
Aye.
Commissioner Castler?
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor?
I'll vote to reconsider it, fine. I'd like to see any new evidence or whatever if we're gonna reconsider, because I don't know what's going on.
Fair
I-
enough.
So what that does is removes him from the board.
That is correct, right? That is what I was,
No.
Now we
you
have to
gotta
revote. okay,
Right.
You're reconsidering.
right, now we have to revote for his appointment.
And discuss it if anyone wants to discuss it.
That is correct.
Okay. So is the topic still on the table? We don't have our counsel here to discuss things?
I asked him to be here. He was unavailable to attend this meeting tonight.
Oh, he, me, and Paul.
No, not Paul,
Bo?
Mr. Rupert, yes.
Oh,
And counsel is not here, and that's what I was advised by him as.
okay. So do we table this to later? You want to go ahead and do something now?
Do we want to revote now?
Yes, let's do it.
Or we can open it to discussion? Is that what we want to do?
Yeah, if we can open a discussion. I mean, I'd like to know what's going on, because, you know, if I'm gonna re-vote, I'd like to know what's changed, you know?
Yes, I agree. So I don't want to air this to everyone
Right,
on
right.
television, so
Okay, so maybe we ought to vote on it next time. I'm okay with looking at it, but I don't, you know, maybe you guys all know what's going on, want to change your vote, but I feel like as a commissioner, I'd like to know what's going on. If there's some news, like you said there was, I'd like to know what it is.
My statement, and I think the best general statement is that I represent I represent a group of people, okay? A group of people that are citizens of Coffeyville. It is of the opinion of the group of people that I represent, that Mr. Rupert does not represent the same values and principles that they stand for. So therefore, me representing those constituents, my vote for Mr. Rupert is no. That's my reasoning. I think
Well,
that's
I-
fair and simple and pretty straightforward.
I understand, that's good, I appreciate that and respect it. But, you know, and you voiced your opinion, but something's changed here and I still don't know what it is. You and I talked about all this before, and I don't know what's changed. You know, I've,
how do we want to approach this?
I've-
Kendall? I mean, I don't really want to air
You shouldn't.
this over
If
the
there's-
television. I mean,
If there's a motion to vote, then we vote and move on. And
Your
I'd make-
statement should be
I'd-
the same as
I'm-
mine.
I'm,
I agree, yeah, I mean, I support what Chris says, and I back what Chris says. I'm in the same opinion as what he is. My opinion is we need to vote, and then I can provide that information to Mr. Taylor after this meeting's over with.
So when we vote, what exactly are we voting to do? We've already reconsidered it, so now we officially we don't have anybody on the board, correct?
That is correct,
So we need
Well,
to
I-
open it back up to the public,
yes.
because we have nobody to vote on.
And I think that, go ahead.
It was explained to me that you're voting to reconsider
The vote.
the vote, and then you have to vote to remove him.
That is the way I understood it
I'd
also.
make the motion to remove Bo Rupert from the Montgomery County Judiciary Advisory Board.
I second.
now, if y'all want to make a statement, we're getting ready to vote on this, correct?
Yes, the
yeah,
motion was
yeah.
made by Commissioner Martin and seconded by Mayor Bauer to remove Bo Rupert from the Montgomery County Juvenile Corrections Board.
Correct.
Mayor Bauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Castler,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor,
No.
Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Martin.
Aye. Okay, so we got something going on here, and I don't know about it. Pretty standard sometimes,
This,
you know, I mean,
there's nothing going on here. I would have voted this way had I been here. 2 weeks
okay, well,
ago.
I'd like to know I don't know why I couldn't have waited until we could have talked about it and been informed.
My position's
But-
pretty much the same as Chris and Paul's.
Yeah.
He doesn't represent my, morals or ethics or my constituents. It's just if I had been given the choice 2 weeks ago, which I was just not here, it's nobody's fault, I
Right,
would
right.
not have voted for Mr. Rupert. There's no,
Well,
It's not a personal
we
issue.
voted on it, I'm good with it.
Okay.
I'm just saying I don't know the difference, what's happened between now and then. I did hear something happen when I was,
I will spend some time
yeah,
with you.
right,
Okay,
sure, I
and-
just,
And I will explain the situation and what has led to my
Sure.
decision of changing.
that's
And-
great. And I respect that, I just
Yep.
want to make the public comment that I don't know what's happened.
Sure. Okay, moving on to new business, resolution number R-17-43, a resolution to amend the City of Coffeyville procurement policy. Financial Director Stephanie Richardson will make comments.
Mayor and Commissioners, this is an item to amend our current procurement policy. It was approved on June 11th of 2013, and since that time, working with this policy, staff has come up with some recommended changes to make it more efficient and more practical to use in our day-to-day settings. As far as the changes that are involved in this policy, what we're recommending is an addition of a definition of what we call a responsible bidder. There are changes to a definition of the change order, and that would include any change in a time or price of a contract rather than the change of scope. It adds a provision for the city manager to execute change orders if it meets the definition of emergency, and as long as it does not exceed the total project budget. It changes the emergency purchases section within the policy to mirror the wording that's in the definition section. It also would set a maximum amount of the preference given on our local business preference. The preference would remain at 5%, which is what it currently is, but it would set a maximum of $5,000, which would equate to any project that's over $100,000. It defines how the local preference is applied based on the business's location, whether it's within our corporate boundaries, whether it's within Montgomery County or the state of Kansas. And it also requires that all outstanding liens, fines, or violations or other debts with the city be paid in order for the preference to apply. The insurance section has a change showing that subcontractors must be licensed with the city in order to do projects. It adds a non-appropriation clause, which is it's a requirement of the Kansas cash basis law, and it provides that wording that's necessary to go in those contracts that would exceed a one-year period. And it also changes the budget section, which outlines the level of responsibility for making purchases within your approved budget while meeting the goals and program services set by the commission. If you have any changes on, or have any questions on the policy or about the changes that we've recommended, I'd be glad to try to answer those.
So I've read through this entire thing, and for the most part, I'm good with the changes. I guess the question that comes up to me is, what constitutes an emergency change order that authorizes our city manager to give that much?
according to the definition right here.
Yeah, that would be in the.
Unforeseen circumstances that present an immediate threat to the public health, welfare, safety, or when immediate response is necessary to prevent further damage to public property, machinery, or equipment, or when delay would result in significant financial impacts to the city or significant interruption to the project schedule as determined by the department head or the city manager.
Can I ask a question? Can you name me 5 emergencies in the last 5 years, or since this thing that's been implemented, which I was here when it was implemented, that has caused an issue, that has caused damage or delayed the project or something? Can somebody give me an example?
That's what I was gonna go next.
The new gen project, there were several examples of change orders that, if they would not, if they would have not taken place, or if we wouldn't have had a commission meeting in a timely manner, that we would have been able to get those approvals, then they would have delayed the project or created scheduling problems that would have delayed it.
If I'm not, we went from a $10,000 procurement policy before to 25, to
25.
now this one goes to
It's still 25.
25, but now we have an exception up to
25.
well,
It says if it doesn't
as long
exceed.
as the
Doesn't
emergency
exceed.
doesn't exceed the
Budget.
total budget of the project. So if you're on a $59 million
Yeah.
project out here, you could theoretically approve a $7.5 million change order because it did not exceed the grand total of that project, which was $59 million, right? So you could actually approve a $7 million change order
But we
under
also-
this
Yeah.
policy.
We also have to bring everything back, and it is ratified by the commission.
But if the money, if the approval is done prior to the commission getting a hold of it, it's done. So,
That's kinda
under
way
this
outside
policy,
also.
you could approve a $7 million change
But the
order.
emergency purchases portion of that has always been in this policy.
But you still haven't answered my question. Could you approve a $7 million change order under what you're proposing?
The 7 million might have been in there, but not to go to that.
And I'm just
That
using that
amount.
as
No, I'm
an
with you.
example.
I'm with you on this.
See what I'm saying? Could you do that under this policy?
Yeah,
Yes.
probably can.
Could you do that?
Okay.
Can you do that currently, right now?
No.
No.
Right now, you can just
That
spend.
portion doesn't really
we-
change. It allows,
Go ahead.
let's see.
Because you said something about the emergency policy that's currently already in there.
He can approve up to 25.
Okay, yeah, I knew about that. I just want to make sure I was on the same page.
Stephanie, when was this policy finalized?
Our current one was approved in 2011.
No, I
Or
mean,
2000
the new one, when were we done with it? We got it Friday, right?
Right.
This is something
Yeah.
to approve. This isn't active. These are changes.
Well, I understand, but we get it, and we're supposed to make a decision when on this?
That's what we're here tonight.
Yeah, well, I'd like to more time to look at it for one thing. Because I haven't had time to review it.
You received this policy two meetings ago, because we postponed it at the last meeting.
Okay, well, somehow I missed it. Okay, I missed this one.
Are you
But
done, Chris?
it does say that in the emergency situation that I have to notify the commission.
I like parts of
Okay.
this policy.
Yeah.
One of the
Yeah.
things is the subcontractors being registered with the city. I think that's
Okay.
and I'm not saying we should kill the whole thing, but there are certain parts of it that need to be tweaked, I think.
I
And
think the
Before
proof
I
of
can-
insurance and things like that for our subcontractors is
Yeah.
a very good,
Yeah.
very good add to this.
I'd like to postpone it to the next meeting to vote on, but I do know we've talked about some of these things in the past, and we didn't even talk about it at the last meeting.
No,
We didn't even talk about it.
we didn't. We were asked to
So-
postpone it to this meeting.
So it's just, I'd like to see, I have a problem with item number 5, the local business preference. Now, first of all, a local business over another one ought to have about a 5 to 10% advantage. We saw that recently.
And they still keep
They
the
still do.
5%, but they max it at $5,000.
Right, I understand. I feel like that's a little bit much, and I've said that before. Your average construction company makes 2 or 3% under their ISIC code. Trucking companies, 2 or 3% average. Okay, and it's a misconception amongst people about that. And I've always said I thought that should be probably less than 5%, because local people have an advantage anyway. They're here. They don't have to mobilize and put people in hotels. and different things. So I for one, okay, as a business person, representing business sometimes, industrial side, have always had a problem with that. You remember we bought some pickups and cars a while back? There was some friction on it, and I think we paid a total with the 5% and the 1% we had, it turned into some pretty good money, and it rubbed me wrong that we would give a local another 4, 5, 6,000, whatever the number was. And, you know, it just seemed like a lot of money. And I said then, no person in this audience would have given extra $5,000 or $6,000. They might give an extra 1,000 or so. But I feel like with all that said, I feel like the 5% should be reduced a little bit. I think that needs to be modified and looked at a little bit. So
What's your suggestion? I mean,
I think we should think about it and talk about it for a little bit. And hear from the public, now that the public's heard, and I think it should be wrote about a little bit and talked about a little bit. It takes away an incentive, and, you know, I don't need to tell most people this, but it takes away a big incentive. And another you know, for contractors to show up so we get a better price in the first place, okay?
so based on the two things I'm hearing, we need to amend the emergency fund
I got some.
in writing. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Whenever
I was just kinda-
Jim's done.
Yeah, and I do thank you, Justin, and I do like the limit it to that 5,000 total. I think that's good. You know,
You just want the percentage.
I think the percentage should be dropped a little bit. Maybe, whatever you guys want to do, I mean, I'd be for voting, I'd just like to see it less.
Can I make a suggestion? Can we, since you want to continue this and have a little bit more time to study it, could we bring this back next meeting and kind of like a line item veto, go down through here and discuss the things that we like and the things that we don't like? Like, I think I think that we all need to agree that the emergency thing needs to be
And
tweaked.
One more, I got one more item I just remembered. Go ahead. But go ahead.
That it needs to be tweaked, that way we have a little bit more budgetary control as a commission. I think that, the other thing is that, you know, basically, you're gonna have to go to a vote of the commission on whether we wanna extend this 5%, lower it to a 3%, because I respect your opinion, Jim, but I'm of a different opinion.
I know we have been. I know we have been.
And I would rather my money that I pay in taxes be spent in Coffeyville than versus spent somewhere else. So that's just my opinion. I'm good with the 5%. These guys down here will have to weigh in on that, and, you know, but I think we need to take these in successive order. That way we and come up with something we're all pleased with.
Right, I think we need to bullet point it out of what our concerns are
Right.
and discuss them bullet point by bullet point, and these are the things, because I'd say probably 90% of it's fine. It's
And
the 10% we just,
And I'd like-
things we need to address.
And I'd like to go back to 10,000 on the spending instead of 25. I've mentioned that in the past. I'd like to go back to the 10,000. I think there's been a time or two we had to get everybody together and talk about it, and I don't have a problem with that. You know, I answer my cell phone all the time, and I'm always available in the case there's an emergency, but I'd like to see us go from 25 back to 10. I know we've talked about it a little bit. I know I've mentioned it one other time.
You know, that severely hamstrings operations if we have to bring any purchase of over $10,000 to the city commission for approval.
Well, which ones have we done since you've been here?
Well, I've signed several that are under the $25,000,
But over the 10,
but over the 10.
I was in the same position you were when we initially voted on this.
Yeah, and they are, but these are budgeted things. I can't
Right.
sign off on anything that isn't budgeted.
And that's what, it took me,
Right.
Oh, what, Bill? You
I
might-
was okay with the 25. The thing is that I think presented itself that, like he just mentioned, they're budgeted items. The city manager doesn't have the authority to go out and, purchase things.
It just
that-
forces you to communicate about it a little bit. You know, it forces you to communicate. And and with our budget being what it's gonna be this next year and the budget issues we talked about, it's just tight.
I
You know,
think you
it's-
rely on your staff too
Well, I
you know,
agree.
You hire your staff
Yeah.
to make those good decisions, and, if
Well,
you
I agree, I
don't,
agree.
if you don't have the proper staff, then you address that issue, but I
No,
don't
I
think that we
agree.
can.
I agree with that.
I'm good with 25, but these other things that he mentioned, I think we need to discuss those.
I think Commissioner Martin has.
Yeah, I got a few things. I'm just gonna give you my opinion. I'm completely okay with continuing the discussion next meeting. That's fine, because some of these things that I've wrote down and want to talk about, somebody may want to talk to me about it next couple of weeks. But I'll just go over a few of them. Like the city manager's ability to spend, the definition of emergency. I'm not on board with that at all. That's nothing to do with you personally. That scares the hell out of me, that
Right,
thinks
right.
somebody could spend $7 million and then next thing, then we're on the hook for it.
Right,
Because, yeah, sure, we got to come here to approve it,
right, right.
but if we've already received the services, we're on the hook,
You know,
no matter what.
Let's talk about this emergency deal right quick. We don't get a chance to.
Let me finish up. That way
Okay,
you can, whatever you want to talk
okay,
about.
thank you. I'm with
And
you.
then the local, the advantage to the local folks, in the past, I've wanted to extend it even higher. And the reason I say, me and Jim got crossed up on the truck deal, and the reason I say that is, if I'd have sent my money to Hutch, I'm just using the trucks as an example, I don't really want to debate it again, but if I'd have spent my money to Hutch, the chances of that dollar making its way back to Coffeyville, pretty slim, probably not going to happen. But I'm pretty confident that if the money went to Independence where it ended up going, that we're almost the same community. I mean, there's a lot of back and forth. So some of that money made it back here. And sure, it's only $5,000 at $100,000, but you start moving up, 5% of 500,000, if my math is right, thankfully the iPhone here.
25.
It's $25,000. The median income in Coffeyville is $32,758. So if you say that the local contractor can't get a 5% break at $25,000, what if he hires somebody at, $30,000? That person's gonna go out and buy some food and pay rent and electric and all that. I'm not on board with that at all. I'd like to raise it up. And then as far as the subcontractors, I've got a little experience in working for contractors and some friends that work for contractors. And you're essentially, when you work for, there's some of them that aren't, but I had a friend that worked for a plumbing company. He was basically contract labor. So he was essentially a subcontractor. But we didn't require that guy to have a permit or insurance. And currently, we don't require the contract employees that, Acme Plumbing or whoever hires to have permits and insurance. So, and my thought is, this company has won the bid to whatever project we do. So anybody they hire to come in and do work, it's going to be their responsibility anyway. They're liable for it. So that subcontractor should fall underneath his insurance and his permits. We're starting to really nitpick as to who and what and where, because each one of those employees, unless he is a vested employee that has insurance and all the other things, most likely is a contract employee. So he's essentially a subcontractor. You're starting to get into, are you going to have a permit for each individual who comes in and works a day worker essentially and gets paid, each week, and he doesn't have anything in the company. That's where I'm at on that. There's a couple things on this proposal that I thought was okay, but the biggest part of it I'm not okay with, and I would vote no if it was come to the vote tonight. that's all I got for now.
On that subcontract, I'd like to know a little more about it. You know, a lot of contracts have that, you, the general contractor, and the subs, and your insurance. I guarantee you, if you got with your bonding companies and your insurance companies that are on the hook for issues in case something happens, want contractors to be licensed for whatever good it does. And I'm not a general contractor. I don't have any general contracting experience. I would want to hear what's happened and why we're changing that from city staff and know a little bit more about that. So this is kind of a big item. We want to get educated. I'd like to be educated more on that. It makes sense for the subcontractors to be licensed. But like Justin says, maybe not all of them. I know you probably got to do it or you don't, but I'd like to know a little bit more about that one.
Any other questions from the commission? I move to table this until the next meeting.
Second. You need a second?
Who's,
I didn't know we need a second.
a motion was made by Mayor Bauer and seconded by Commissioner Kessler to table this item to the next meeting. Commissioner Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Bauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor,
Aye.
Commissioner Kessler,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Right.
Okay, so we have a clear, we're gonna, Kendall, we table it for 1 week. That means we gotta get everything done between now and then. 2 weeks, I'm sorry, 1 meeting. Can we get some information on, I'd like to see item numbers on these in the future, A, B, C, D, but item number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 6 is the insurance for the subcontractors. We'd like to know something about that. The why part of it, why or why not, like Justin was talking about on that. Yeah, and then if there's any, I would like to have maybe a list, and if you guys aren't up to it, you want to leave it at 25,000, that's not going to keep me from voting for it, but I would like to know, take a peek at the last items we've had to do between the 10 and the 25. Maybe we want to go back to 20. I don't know. I'd like to look at those items, if that's not too much work. If you can just remember them, Stephanie, that'd be fine too. You know, verbally would be fine, but I'd like to know more about that. But I'd like to educate myself like Chris has been educated on it.
And then the emergency fund, the amount spent that we're allowed to spend.
Yeah, we need to look at that a little bit too. We need some information there.
Yep.
Because I'm with Justin on his comments on that and Chris on that.
On that, could you be a little bit more specific on that one, on the emergency part? What is the,
So I think as Chris made the example that it would be allowed to spend $7 million.
There's no cap.
There's no
okay,
cap
well,
on
there
that.
is a cap, and because it does say you can't exceed the project budget.
And that was the example though, is that on a project like our electric generation plant, that was a $56 million project. So under this
Yeah, well,
policy, there would be the budgetary authority of the city manager could spend upwards of, I just used 7, but there's no limit up to 56. That's just, there's too much leeway there. There's gotta be checks and balances. And the thing is that if there's no checks and balance, then that's what we're here for. That's the purpose of this commission, is to regulate the funding and the money flow of the city. And the thing is I think that.
So if we were to come.
Can I
Sure.
finish, please? I'm of the opinion that not you, not anybody before you, maybe one, but the thing is that budget authority to be able to make the decision to spend whatever the amount is you want to pick that's very high in a project that is millions of dollars. Those elected officials not being in the mix of that, this takes them out of it in the emergency. The thing is that there's no one on this commission that doesn't live here in Coffeyville. There's no one on this commission that couldn't be here if called upon at a reasonable amount if there's this drastic emergency.
Right.
And the thing is that I asked for examples of drastic emergencies, and the thing is I still haven't got one that's a huge drastic emergency that didn't prevent that thing from being built on time and under budget.
Well, like I said, I did use my emergency authority on
One item at the power plant.
on the power plant at least a couple of times, but they were under
Right.
my already allotted 25,000.
Well,
So, I mean, we
the-
can come back, we'll come back with some
You're
suggestions.
allotted 25,000, is what I'm saying. This doesn't allot you.
This doesn't have.
There is no
tags.
allotment. The thing is this is all the way up to the total amount of the project. So your emergency kick-in thing is 25,000, but if we change it to the total allotted part
If
of
we
the
recommend a
budget,
cap, maybe, I mean,
there you go.
25,000?
You know, so
Well, that-
just something,
well,
because
that
the
doesn't change
thing-
anything.
the thing is that there are no checks and balances on this particular policy, because it's all the way to not to exceed the amount of the project.
What?
Well, the thing is that is great when you're discussing projects that are $10,000 projects, $20,000 projects, things of that nature. But when you're discussing, $6 million project, $56 million project, that gap there far exceeds anything that I want to, as a representative, to, not that I'm not wanting to trust somebody, but we've got to have that checks and balance. That way we don't get ourselves in a position to where we find ourselves
What brought this on, Ken?
the owner of something we didn't know that we now own.
in staff meeting, we've started looking at some of our policies and trying to update them and make certain that,
So there's no, I don't feel like I'm kicking the can here, but there's nothing's happened to say that, hey,
Right.
I need to be able to spend $60 million.
right.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to ordinance number G-17-03, the first reading of an ordinance to amend municipal court costs. Police Chief Quinn Bromlin will make comments.
Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. The city staff is requesting a slight increase to court costs, and that's going to be in the amount of $5 to cover monies remitted back to the state of Kansas per state statute. Additionally, with the operation of a new jail facility, staff is recommending fees associated with jail operations be approved, passing essentially user fees on to the convicted criminal offender. What this ordinance will do, it'll enable our municipal court judge to pass on those fees associated with criminal cases to our convicted offenders, convicted. If somebody's not convicted, these aren't passed on to them. It shouldn't be the responsibility of a taxpayers to pay inmate medical expenses that we incur routinely every day. Pre-existing conditions from attorney, or from inmates going up to the county jail, we have to take those to the emergency room. That costs taxpayers every time we do that. Attorney fees, record expungements that we're currently doing, and repeated issuing of arrest warrants for failure to appear. These are all expenses that we incur that is passed on to the taxpayers and not currently to convicted criminal offenders, and I want to change that.
So what you're saying is, if you cause these fees to be justified, you need to pay for them.
That is correct.
I have a problem with that.
I have no problem with that.
What about other cities, Quinn? What are they doing? How,
so-
how do we fit in with other cities?
There are attorney fees. This court will assign an attorney to an individual who at the time doesn't have the money to retain.
No, I don't mean the
Attorney.
attorney fees, I mean for these extra court costs.
Oh, there's a whole list of different things throughout the state of Kansas that our municipal court is required to remit monies back to. Everything from the Law Enforcement Training Center to judge training to various other funds and that the state of Kansas has mandated that we pay into.
I'm not gonna try to step on your toes. I think what he's referring to is for Chinook, for example.
Right.
Their jail. Or what
Those
are their
costs.
charges? Do they
Right,
charge us other
exactly.
things? Is that what you're
Exactly,
implying?
thank you,
Okay.
Paul.
Okay,
That's
so
the user fees,
Yeah. Expungement fees, the warrant fees,
Right.
those things like
Being-
that.
Being housed in the county jail costs taxpayers $35 a day, plus any associated medical expenses that we have to incur. I'm just simply wanting to pass those back onto the criminal defendant and not onto all of us.
so it says cost is recommended 0 here, and you're asking for this, I understand. How much, what are you thinking this will be? Is it open-ended?
This isn't costing
doesn't
us
cost us.
anything.
I know, but what's it costing them?
It will cost the convicted criminal defendants $110
Okay.
in municipal court,
Okay,
and for municipal violations, and $85 for traffic violations.
okay.
And that enables
Where
us
is
to
that
run
document?
the municipal court, pay our municipal court judge, our prosecuting attorney.
But just to clear up, you won't pay these if you're found innocent
different,
in court of law.
Well, it looks different than yours.
But if you broke the law,
Okay.
it shouldn't be my burden that you chose to do that. Same, like, if I have a bad day and decide to be an idiot and break the law, you shouldn't pay for me either, so.
Just trying to, all I'm trying to do is streamline the budget, pass on current expenses that we're encountering back onto the criminal
It's
convicted.
basically another $5 in, is what you're saying. That's all you're talking
For
about.
the court costs. The other additional items, the attorney fees, the fingerprinting fees, the incarceration fees, including
Okay.
medical expenses, the warrant fee, the expungement fees, those are all spelled out in the packet that we presented to you.
So,
That's-
so what are the other cities getting by with that?
Sir?
Other cities are getting by with that?
Yeah, actually, we're one of the few cities that doesn't charge to expunge somebody's record, and that takes a considerable amount of our court clerk's time and taxpayer money to do, to expunge a criminal's record. And other communities, they have to pay an attorney or pay that municipality to take care of that for them.
Good.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commission?
No.
I'll make a motion to approve
Thank you.
ordinance number G-17-03.
Second.
Motion was made by Mayor Bauer and seconded by Commissioner Castler to approve ordinance number G-17-03 for first reading. Commissioner Taylor.
Aye.
Commissioner Martin.
Aye.
Commissioner Castler.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Mayor Bauer.
Aye. Resolution number R-17-48, a resolution to execute an agreement with Retail Strategies. City Manager Kendall Francis will make comments.
Mayor and Commissioners, approximately about a year ago, June 18th of last year, June 28th of last year, we approved a 3-year contract with Retail Strategies for retail recruitment and retention services. And however, the 3-year contract was set so that we could lock in rates for that time period, but we're allowed a review period each year to review their services and determine whether or not we want to continue with the service. During their first year, Retail Strategies has been actively engaged with city staff and representing and recruiting retail to Coffeyville. And a couple of the things that I've outlined here are some concrete results that have happened over the course of the last year. They've worked very heavily with Jared Development, who is the new owner of the Coffeyville Plaza, and helped them to recruit both Shoe Sensation and Dollar Tree to that location. They've worked with myself and Tricia prior to today in providing retail analytics. They have helped represent us on behalf of several trade shows across the nation. We've had them, every time that we have some interest with a developer on the retail side, we make contact with them, and they're engaged in those negotiations to help us to determine, you know, what some of those best fits are for possible developments here in Coffeyville. And so it's my recommendation that we go ahead and approve year 2 of the contract. This is budgeted in the Economic Development Fund under the Professional Services of Retail and Marketing.
So you think we've got a return on our investment?
I believe so. In fact, if you were to look back at the original staff report from a year ago, one of the examples that was laid out was specifically Dollar Tree, and that the sales tax off a Dollar Tree amounts at the 3 cents amounts to roughly $42,000 in a year time. That's based on average sales of a Dollar Tree, and so that one facility would pay for our first year's investment.
Well, there's, you know, quite a few people out there in the community that think this is a bad vote, a bad investment. I personally probably wouldn't do it, but if it was, you know, my deal, but we decided to go ahead and start it.
You know, and I have provided you individually with some other information that was really not for, you know, public's knowledge on some of the things that are currently taking place. In fact, I guess it was actually Friday, late Friday, that I spoke with people from Retail Strategies about one of those projects, and you know, a little bit of further information, you know, on how that is moving and some changes of events there. So.
Okay.
You cite, Calmar,
Sure, brother.
you cite, Dollar Tree, Shoe Sensation, and they've also helped with some things with Dollar General.
Yeah, they were in the initial discussions when Dollar General's developer first approached us.
I think money spent that gets results is not a bad decision. I think that if we continue this and the results don't continue, then that's when we have a problem.
I would agree.
So,
I agree with that also. I mean, I think, like you said, proof's in the pudding, and so far they've delivered on
what they said they were.
what they said they would do, and with some potential, with what you provided us on your last report. So, you know, it looks favorable, and if it continues to move in that direction, then I see no reason to drop them at this point.
Would you say it's fair to say that the first year is kind of hard for the first year? It's hard for a business like this to get started because they gotta go data and
I don't know if I'm really qualified to judge what hard is. For them, for me, it seems hard. For them, I think they're experts and pretty well schooled in what they do, and they were providing analytics and significant details within the first month of signing the contract.
I think if I remember right, I met with a guy, with you.
Yes, that's correct.
And talked to him. You know, I think it'd be hard, it wouldn't be potent for us to stop something midway when will they have just started, and the list that you sent me, if we get a good portion of that, we'll be doing a whole lot,
Well, like I said,
a whole lot better.
the expected return in sales tax off Dollar Tree alone paid that first year.
Yep.
You know, we will need to look hard at the third year. But they have done nothing but, you know, deliver exactly what they promised.
And Jared Development was involved with trying to get the other Walmart site.
That's correct.
Okay. So they're trying, but that's kind of a hard sell, I imagine. You know, I'm all for moving along with this at least this year and next year. If they fail to produce much, then I say we do it, but I say, like the others, that is an investment, and sometimes you gotta spend money to make a little money.
Well, we're voting, just so the public's clear and we're clear, we're voting for phase 2 the second year, and then next year we come back and vote again, right?
Right.
Yep.
So, you know, we're rolling the dice again. We can always not roll them next year, so.
Yeah, we always have the ability to say no more.
The first year's results were obviously a good thing for Coffeyville. Hopefully the second year continues right along.
I agree.
So
Okay,
I don't have any further questions,
motion.
comments.
Notice anything to say? I make a motion to pass the resolution to.
I'll second.
1748.
Motion was made by Commissioner Castler and seconded by Mayor Bauer to approve resolution number R-17-48 for adoption. Commissioner Martin.
Aye.
Commissioner Castler.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Mayor Bauer.
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor.
I'll go ahead, yes.
We'll move on to the city manager's report.
Mayor and Commissioners, I was gonna start off by saying something about the summer celebration, but I see Gail and Mike are here, and so I will leave that for them. I know they would like to say something, but I just updating you on a couple things. On some street projects, Reed Street, there at the underpass, that work has been completed. So, and then our 10th Street, our planned CDBG project, the one that we will be applying for the upcoming year. The fire department has assisted us in going door to door and delivering the low to moderate income surveys that are needed to help us qualify for that grant. So they've been working on that for the last couple of weeks, and
So that helps them get it done, right?
yeah, that's correct. We have to have at least 51% of the affected population, so the residents at 10th Street, qualify for low to moderate income guidelines for us to qualify for the CDBG. And so they were going door to door and helping with those surveys and getting those returns so that we can make our application later this year. So it's a key part of that whole project. So, but and that project will somewhat mirror what we did on 9th Street, probably minus the sidewalks, because that portion of the grant isn't available this year. And then speaking of grants, we just submitted the application for the Safe Routes to School Phase 2. You know, you knew that we were awarded the Phase 1 last year. We have completed that, and Phase 2 is a $400,000 grant for construction, and it's an 80-20 match, so that deadline was July 7th, I believe. So we just submitted that, and I'm not certain when we'll hear, but late summer, early fall.
This year or next?
This year, yes. Yep.
Yeah, that's good news.
We'll kind of going along with the grant theme. The police department was awarded a $20,000 grant to purchase a live scan fingerprint machine, and so kudos to them for applying for that and being awarded that, and that'll be delivered later this year as well. On a little bit of a more somber note, Ziva, our police dog, her remains were brought back to Coffeyville today. And she'll be, for right now, she'll have a place of honor at the police station, and then we'll have a ceremony for a burial at a later date. Sunflower Walmart, we will be moving ahead with demolition on that, and contracted with Mark Mueller, who had agreed to honor his bid and contract. So we will move forward with that. It will be after Fair and Rodeo at his request, so probably late August, early September. Also, I'd like to let you know that Officer Ed Rutherford will be retiring, and we're going to have a reception for him on Wednesday, July 26th from 2 to 4 at the police department. So that's really all I have at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open it up to comments from the public. The public's free to comment on items not listed on the agenda. Please address comments to the commission as a body, and be mindful of others who may also wish to speak by limiting your comments to 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, sort of kind of not on the agenda, but now that you've set the budget hearing for August 8th, I would like to remind the people that are listening, and hopefully this will show up in the paper as well, that when people are complaining about their taxes, they need to remember, and it's been pointed out before, that Coffeyville is actually, and I apologize I don't have the exact numbers, for taxing authority, Coffeyville is actually somewhere between the bottom third to 1/2 of cities of similar size in the state. What is negatively impacting everyone are all these other taxing authorities that pile on top of that. Some examples, like I said, it's not just the city, and these are all independent taxing authorities who can raise your taxes for what they think they want rather than just what are genuine needs. The City Recreation Commission, USD 445, Coffeyville Community College, Montgomery County, State of Kansas, Wildcat Extensions, City Library. Did I miss anybody? Did I miss anyone there? So if these are independent taxing authorities that pile on. So if you want to complain about your taxes, you need to go to these other entities, to the public tax hearings for these groups, and make your voice heard. It's not just the city of Coffeyville, it's all these other organizations. And oftentimes, like I said, they very well could be raising your taxes for things, neat things they think they want rather than just what they need. Thank you.
Go there and make friends, huh? Go there and make friends.
Right. But it's the only way your voice can be heard. You've got to go to these other meetings as well.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Hey, good point, James. Now, I understand you're running for commissioner.
I am.
Uh-oh. Now, I said uh-oh because you beat them back there, Mary. You beat them.
Well, ladies,
It wasn't because you're coming up.
ladies before gent, you know.
Right.
I'm Mary Wilson, live here in Coffeyville, and last Saturday, we had 15 vendors for the farmer's market, the most that we have ever had, and there were some delicious roasting ears. $5 a dozen, and that's a baker's dozen. I had a gentleman who is in his 90s, is a member of the First Christian Church, which has angle parking. And he's requesting you put a stop sign back on Elm Street. We find that when we're ready to leave the church activities, there are cars that are coming down at the maximum speed on Elm Street. And they're there before we can get back out. Sunday, I thought I had clear, and I looked another time. You always look 2 and 3 times when you're backing out. And there were 2 cars that had stopped. I think it was a California stop where they don't really stop. They came around the corner off of 9th Street, and I sure had to slam on my brakes without being involved. That's what prevented it. But the traffic is just coming through so fast, and with angled parking, it is difficult. And this gentleman that asked me to talk to you about it tonight is in his 90s. We're a little bit slower when we get up in our ages, so we need some help now and then.
If I
And
do
you
this-
probably never had anybody ask for a stop sign.
What street was that on?
Ninth and Elm?
Ninth and Elm.
I didn't get
This is
the
our
ninth
First
one.
Christian Church. Don't know if any other churches have that kind of problem too, but I was sure shocked when these two cars came around the corner. But I didn't hit them.
That's the
Thank
main
you,
thing.
guys.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Come on up, gentlemen.
I'm Gail Smith, Mayor, Commissioners, staff, Coffeyville Summer Celebration. We'd just like to come and acknowledge, I'm gonna go ahead and acknowledge Mike and Susie Bradley with their lawn service, Andy and Alexis Duncan, Blake Lube and Glass, Jimmy and Brandy Avery. Brandy did a lot of social media along with my wife. Rich and Angie Stevens for the run, Shorty Foreman to arrange the motorcycle show, and of course the city of Coffeyville. The grounds were beautiful again. We're just doing like we did last year. All the departments, I was out there for about a week, and the Public Works, the Water Department was out there, the Electric Department was out there. Everybody was so cordial and kind of helping us get the venue ready for the summer celebration. We thought it was a great success. We had about 220 cars at the car show. The kiddie cars that Mike sponsored, that was a big hit out there. We had probably hundreds of people that cheered them on. The motorcycle show, we didn't have a whole lot, but it's the first year. Our DJs, our bands put on two great, we thought, concerts. And then our fireworks show, Kirk Stevens and Seeger Evans from Raytown, Missouri, come down. They worked from Wednesday till Saturday and put that show on. We just thought it was a great success. We had a lot of people out there. A lot of vendors, merchandise and food. But anyway, we just wanted to come again and thank the city for believing in us. July the 7th of next year. That's all I got to say.
I agree with Gail. It was a great success this year. Cars were up probably 25%. We brought guests into Coffeyville from 6 states this year on our car show, and that's saying something for car shows, to get guys to trailer their cars in here. We had 2 that was 40 miles east of St. Louis that came to Coffeyville for our show. Oklahoma, Mother Nature was on our side in Coffeyville this year. I thank her, but she went south of us, and so Oklahoma was one of our big, that I thought was really going to be big. But that morning, Oklahoma, Tulsa, and all that area had a gentleman that chose us still over 3 other shows from Oklahoma City. So we did good. The 5K run, Angie was disappointed, and I applauded her. We had 40 runners our first year, and so that's 40 more people that came into our city. I talked to Commissioner Cashler. He was at the Dalton Museum on Saturday, couldn't make the event. I talked to him a little bit. He says it was up, people at the Dalton Museum was up that day.
We had about 25 people
So-
show up that weekend.
So we brought people to our Dalton Museum. They went, they eat, they buy gas in our city. I still think we're probably around, Cindy, you were taking pictures, we were probably 10,000 at showtime for the fireworks. I really noticed a difference on our bands this year.
I looked out when I was up on stage, and Kendall did too, that seen the people over in the, in our vendors venue. You know, we spoke with our vendors. They were gonna leave at 6, right after the car show. And we talked to them and said that would be a big mistake. And after everything was over that night, my phone was ringing, and all the vendors were asking to come back next year. And so that is something good. And every one of our vendors, not every one of them, but every one that I got to speak to, offered me $100 for their spot that day. And we told them no. That is for the community, and we took care of it that day. But that's how great Coffeyville is in our community and how we got to show it off. That's what Coffeyville Summer Celebration's about, is showing off Coffeyville. And I'm proud to say, with Gail and Andy and you guys, we showed off Coffeyville last Saturday, and I was very proud of us. So we're just here to tell you guys thank you.
I think we should give you a big thank you also. That was a lot of work. Go ahead.
I just got a couple more. Kim and Trey Maxon, they were real instrumental out there too. The yoke.
Automotive. Carter's Automotive.
Carter's Automotive. You know, Debbie set up we call it the Midway.
Yeah, it was a great display that she put on for us out there.
But, you know, I think probably a real big thank you goes out to a lot of the Coffeyville businesses. You know, they saw us last year. They came through way bigger this year. And that's why we were able to have 2 bands. And, you know, so they're starting to believe in us more. They see what, you know, a small group can put together. And I'm going to continue to do it. I'm going to continue to commit to it. And we'll do the legwork and try to get it all together.
I'd
Thank you, guys.
You know, we've talked about this a year or two, Gail, and it sounds like it's going good, it's gonna grow, and it'll be good. While you're standing here, I'd like to ask a couple questions. You answered one of them about the 10,000 people. We were standing up here a minute ago, someone said 2,000, someone said 5, someone said more than 5. You're thinking 10,000 people were out in that area, right?
We put drones up in the air that night, and we asked them to do the outskirts.
Right.
Instead of just the fireworks, we wanted to see the vehicles.
Right.
I got up on the stadium, and there was not a spot left in the park, and I'm not talking just the park. I'm talking every parking space that had grass, gravel, blacktop. There was no parking in the park. I spoke to people at the old Walmart. There was no parking in the old Walmart. The new Walmart, there was no parking left in the new Walmart. Cook Pump, there was no parking left. Canoma Co-op put on a barbecue over there. Their parking lot was full, including where the buildings were, was full. And every parking lot on the highway in between, plus the highway. The show was delayed a little bit because we had to move people off of the berm and the grass because there was no place for them to sit, and they moved into our fireworks site, and so we had to move them. So if you, I mean, just think, do the math. How many people is that? And so.
Well, that's great. That's good. That's great news. I'm hoping the city can get involved, as we've spoke a year ago and then recently, with helping more and look at those numbers. You know, I hate to see, you know, certain people like Gail and you, whoever I'd like to see more city involvement, business involvement. It's just a little too much to ask.
Yeah, and I will tell you, anybody that we went to in the city and the people that came to us, there was no business that told us no.
Okay, well, it's great to see it, and the business side, the city side, it's a growing thing, and it's really, you guys are really to be praised for. The whole team, I know there's a lot more not stand here, and we need to do what we can, and it was a great show. I will say one more thing. I heard somebody say, well, this thing's about over, about halfway through it, and it just kept going on and on. So you guys buy the fireworks after the 4th, correct?
I send Kirk Stevens, I send him a check in January. You want me, I disclose you some figures if you like.
Yeah, we'd like
I
to
sent,
hear.
I sent Kirk Stevens, I committed $30,000 to this event. I sent him a check for $30,000, along with the city, along with the businesses. We had somewhere in the neighborhood of a $45,000 show out there. But I sent him a check for that amount in January. That way he gets pick of anything in that warehouse he wants. Plus, when we buy them early, we get a 25% discount. So I said, I don't want the discount, instead the 25% on. And that's how come we've got such a big fireworks show.
Somebody said if you bought them after the 4th, you got a discount. The story has now been
Yeah.
told, and
The earlier we
flying
buy
around.
them, the earlier we buy the fireworks,
Okay.
pay for them up front, the better selection. And I thought Kirk is really good about choreographing. You've seen the fronts and then the highs and everything.
That's all done electronically, I'm told.
He's got a new wireless system.
Look at our
If-
national anthem. If it didn't send chills down your back that night.
When Robbie Bell was singing, I was on the phone with Kirk, he couldn't hardly hear, and so the rockets red glare, and if you'd notice that rockets looked like an American flag. It was blue, then red and white, and then, at the end of the song, the bombs bursting in air. And at the end of the song, right at the home of the brave, he sent one of the biggest shells up there to just kind of end that song, and then, we just turned the show over to him, so.
I was back too far and I didn't know that much. I didn't know Robbie was singing.
Yeah.
Didn't hear that either.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll get more crowd up front, but all those things come in time. Well, thank you, Gail.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
great information, Mike. Thank you again.
Thank you.
guys again.
I'd like to share real quick that Commissioner Martin and I met a man from Colorado, but it was Fort Collins, Colorado, and he was in the slot next to me in an RV, and we talked, and he wanted to know all about Coffeyville. He didn't know about the RV park and some other things. He actually came to the Adult Defenders Museum that Sunday, and then after that, he actually went to Violet's birthday party over there as well. So people just coming just through town are hearing about it and doing an excellent job of probably spreading the word of what Coffeyville was.
Yeah,
And I
and the
think
Chamber of Commerce, they sent it out to all the chambers also for us this year. So it was going through a lot of chambers to get it out. We're on national car sites, and they put in a big article about Coffeyville Summer Celebration. We did a lot of media, advertising for this.
If you look up and down 11th Street, the Chamber of Commerce sign, the college sign, the insurance, anyway, the banks, Downing Insurances, sorry, and then Community State Bank, Equity Bank, we got with all of them and said, can you put this on your sign? So, that's the main thoroughfare through town. I think we got a lot of attention to Coffeyville through that, so. But it was a lot of legwork, but.
Yeah, 2,500 flyers we handed out this year at car shows. We started in February in Tulsa, and then flyers that we didn't even know about was in Wichita, because we got those car shows from Wichita.
So it'll grow. It sounds like it's gonna get bigger.
Yes, it did.
It's an evolution thing, the more we show them, maybe the bigger they'll get.
Yep, and we started with the very young and we went to the very old, because we took our cars to the nursing homes after the car show, so. And then the Power Wheel car show, it was a big hit. I think we'll have a lot more cars next year. So we'll let you guys know.
Let's leave with a little clap, thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to comments from the commissioners and staff.
I got a real short one. I was gonna tell them guys where they left. The people that I was sitting with had just come in from Colorado, and they was just there, you know, just to hang out. And once the show was over, and I'll agree, I said at least 3 times, that must be the finale, and it just kept getting bigger. But when it was done, they turned around and went, wow, that was bigger than the Rockies baseball team had the 4th of July. I mean, they were floored. You guys did a good job. Apparently, you beat the Colorado Rockies Major League Baseball display. So, there you go.
I've got a real good friend, and he's a veterinary, Tony Kurtz, that he's been to LA Stadium or Dodger Stadium and Yankee Stadium. He came up to me and he said, they've got nothing on you. So
That was a big deal.
That
I
is-
mean, it ain't even playing around, it's a big
That's
deal.
great.
That's all I got. Unless somebody wants to say something, we can talk about something else.
Anything else from the commission?
No, is that the end?
That's the end.
Well, are we gonna, so if we made a
Just like
decision
that-
to,
like
you're
that-
always laughing at me.
We're gonna,
Are we gonna video the
well,
podcast?
we're not, this isn't the end. We have executive
I
session.
We need a-
understand
Okay.
that,
we need a
but
break, Mayor.
Just so people will know whether they're gonna stay tuned in or not. That's why I said it.
Yep.
Okay, good.
I guess, you gonna air it then? Okay, that's the decision. So at this time, we'll make a motion to move to executive session.
Second.
5-minute break. We'll start at 8:25 for non-elected personnel.
How long?
Non-elected personnel.
10 minutes.
Go 15.
15. All right, sorry.
We need a motion.
The motion is made for non-elected personnel
For the
for,
purpose of discussing the evaluation of the city manager.
right.
And how long?
15. Not to exceed 15.
I think we should not to exceed 30 minutes.
Oh, 30 on that.
We can always come
okay.
back.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you want to reconvene or you want to reconvene at 8:45?
Well, there was something about a break in there or
There was,
something.
after a
Yes,
5-minute
we'll
break.
take a 5-minute break.
8:50.
It'll begin at whatever.
8:25, and then it will end at 8:55.
Okay.
Could I say something real quick? There's some confusion on the executive session deal because the Kansas State Legislature decided to throw in some additional wording that has to be said when you move to executive session.
Correct.
So it's kind of we're trying to put all the pieces together. So we really actually know what we're doing. We're just trying to put the proper words in there to satisfy our Kansas legislature because they have to be involved.
Who seconded the motion?
Who seconded the motion?
I'll second it.
The motion was made by Mayor Bauer and seconded by Commissioner Taylor to recess to executive session to discuss an individual employee's performance pursuant to the non-elected personnel matter exception to reconvene in the commission room at 8:55. And that will include a 5-minute break.
That's correct.
Correct.
All in favor?
Aye.